Folks, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Bob Peters, and I'm with The Buzz. And I'm here to dress up in a suitable Confederate attire. There has been, as you well know, considerable controversy over Confederate monuments. Folks have been taking down statues and have been covering up statues and have been defacing statues that memorialize the Civil War from the Confederate standpoint. And we happen to have such monuments and dedications to the Confederacy here in Franklin County, particularly at the John Wiley Templeton Confederate Memorial Cemetery. And I'm standing in front of the sign that commemorates the Confederate dead. And I'd like to walk around and show you what's happening. I do not think, as far as I know, that there's been any protest here in Franklin County regarding our monuments. Now, we have monuments of some significance, and as far as I know, this dirty little fella, a fine fella, and by dirty I mean he's a little bit smudged, but he is a Confederate soldier, and I do not think that what you might see on the on your screens is anywhere indication of any defacement. He is proudly reminding us of the sacrifice he made in defending the state of Tennessee. You may remember that our good General Braxton Bragg, who was about as incompetent a Confederate general as you imagine, retreated after winning every battle he fought. And of course, in 1863, after remaining on the Little Duck River from the winter of 1862 through the spring of 1863, left and abandoned Middle Tennessee forevermore. Until, of course, later J.P. Hood, the great, not J.P. Hood, John Bell Hood, after losing the Battle of Franklin, decided to attack Nashville. Braxton Bragg, of course, as you may remember, never knew the word attack. And likewise, John Bell Hood never knew the word retreat. But anyway, we'd like to look at the other monument here. And this is another Confederate. You will note that there are no memorials or monuments such as this to any Confederate generals. This is just an average soldier. This is the Franklin County Confederate Memorial Cemetery in memory of the brave men from the Franklin County area who defended their homeland against northern aggression. In fact, I've always told this story. I guess some folks in Franklin County don't know that I have a rabbi, and my rabbi wore his yarmulke or kippah. That's that head covering that Jewish folks wear, and especially rabbis wear. And he was wearing a black kippah or a yarmulke, and I told him that's pretty tacky. And he said he was going to Tel Aviv. I said, when you're in Tel Aviv, get me a big orange yarmulke. Well, I got a package about 3 weeks later, in a package delivered directly from Tel Aviv in Israel. But instead of having an orange kippah, there was inside a kippah with a Confederate battle flag on it. And he noted that he had looked all over Tel Aviv for an orange kippah, but he could not find one. But he found many kippahs emblazoned with Confederate memorabilia, including the battle flag. And in Israel, the Confederacy, and particularly many of its military leaders, and more particularly Nathan Bedford Forrest, are revered in Israel. And in Israel, the Civil War, much as what's emblazoned here, is denominated the War of Northern Aggression. and I still have my 2 kippas he sent me, along with the letter he sent. And the only Confederate general that's memorialized here is Lieutenant General A.P. Stewart. That's Alexander P. Stewart. He was, by the way, he has a statue, A.P. Stewart has, in the front of the courthouse in Hamilton County. And there's considerable hue and cry and protest about removing his statue. It says that it causes hard feelings and certain uncomfiture amongst certain citizens in Hamilton County. A.P. Stewart has a connection to Franklin County because his parents were from Franklin County. And he happened to lead an exemplary life following the Civil War. And I don't think anybody in Franklin County is willing to or wants to cover it up, even though the way this memorial is designed, somebody surely, if they had such a mind, might well cover it with a bed sheet or some other covering that you might easily obtain at Hammers. As far as I know, there are rows and rows of Confederates. For example, here's William Kelly, who was in the 17th Tennessee Regiment and died in combat in January of 1864. It's typical of these gravestones. Now, I made the pronouncement publicly that I didn't know of any black Confederates to be buried. But I said there may have been black Confederates. But I have since uncovered some remarkable facts about the fact that there were black citizens of Franklin County that actually served on behalf of the Confederacy during the Civil War. None of whom, however, are buried here. But in fact, now that I've introduced you to what transpired in the John Wiley Templeton Confederate Memorial Cemetery, I think we will go to another cemetery which will give you a completely different outlook on what might have transpired. By the way, to give proper perspective, I was told, some people said that it's probably not appropriate to wear a Confederate hat. Although it's the same as the hats that are on those 2 young soldiers over there. But I said it is not inappropriate. It's consistent with a recognition that those who were buried here fought for what they considered the defense of their state and their country. I commend them. However, my relatives were of a distinctly different bent. In Jackson County, Alabama, there were numerous Unionists that consistently aided the Union during the Civil War, and were in fact commended for it later on. The federal government offered pensions to those Southerners that had assisted in the Union effort, and lengthy applications were made. And several of the applications were made by my forebears. And one of the most notorious and recognized Union sympathizers and aider of the Union was a relative of mine. His name was Pleasant Woodall. Pleasant Woodall is now buried in a cemetery that was later administered by a Confederate veterans organization. And when they would clean the cemetery, they would take all the trash and dump it on Pleasant Woodall's gravestone. He was recognized for his resistance to a Confederate conscription. One of the things that most concerned the citizens in Jackson County and why Jackson County was different from Franklin County, Tennessee, I don't know, was the forced conscription of young men. They felt it was a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. And one of the most notorious and nasty individuals that ever came out of Jackson County, Alabama, was a man named Pete Whitecotton. And Pete Whitecotton was a notorious thumper, that is, a recruiter for the Confederate Army of young Jackson County boys to fight for the Confederacy. He was resisted, and because of by numerous citizens, and was shot to death in 1865. But his brothers still remained, and in June of 1869, at a Masonic picnic, there was a notorious fight between the Woodalls and the Whitecottons, and the two remaining brothers of Pete Whitecotton were, as we said, shot down like mad dogs. And following that, the Whitecottons, who had, after all, been notorious supporters of an aggressive conscription effort on behalf of the Confederacy, abandoned Jackson County and moved to Texas. The reason we all know this is because of the lengthy applications that had been made for federal pensions. But we will now continue this story, because I have a totally different story regarding a completely different pension given to a completely different man under completely different circumstances. And we will now adjourn to a completely different cemetery. We have just finished our sojourn from the John Wiley Templeton Confederate Memorial Cemetery, in which many brave Confederates died and are buried, all of whom were white people. However, and I had made the statement earlier that I knew of no black Confederates that had been memorialized or buried in Franklin County, but I was told that that's not the case. And to prove that that's not the case, I am now in the Asia Cemetery here off the Lake Road. If you could pan around, I'll show you where I am. And a lot of you in Franklin County may not be aware of the Asia community. In 1921, the state of Tennessee appropriated money for pensions for those who had served in the Confederacy and who, of course, were still alive. And one of those individuals that applied for a pension was a black man named Lewis Knight. And he filed for a pension, and I have a copy of his application, and it stated, "Color man's application for pension," is what it says. And in the application, he said that he went south in 1863. I'm reading from the application. With his young masters, A.J. and B.F. Knight. And he remained with Lee's army until the until the surrender of Lee's army on April 9, 1865. And he served faithfully. And he has been buried in the Asia Cemetery, and his gravestone is memorialized along with his service in the Confederate Army. And we're here showing you the gravesite and the tombstone of Lewis Knight, who served as a teamster and a cook with the Confederate Army, and he served proudly as a veteran. So you folks that are protesting that may think twice of protesting the gravesite of a brave black citizen of Franklin County who served in the Confederacy. Now, there was another black Confederate, but we don't know where he was buried. May I show you this? I have a photograph that has been given to me of some of the Confederates in Franklin County, Tennessee, who were living in 1895. And the last one in the line, with, by the way, with the finest hat of the entire bunch, is a man named Daniel Robinson, identified, as it was in those days, as colored. So we know at least of two of our good citizens of Franklin County that fought for the Confederacy and who were not white. And that's, of course, the great Lewis Knight and young Daniel Robinson. I think that this ought to give you a historical perspective, and it surely is something that I did not know. And if I didn't know it, I suspect there's others in Franklin County that did not know it. I know I've talked to a lot of people that did not know it. I have talked to numerous black folks that live in Franklin County who do not know it. I think everyone needs to know it, and it shows that irrepressible conflict was more complicated than we might think, and to make labels and make demonstrations and defame and deface and to remove and discolor those monuments to the past is probably not the right thing to do. And so, folks, if you want to honor the Civil War and want to honor the sacrifices, not the Civil War, but the sacrifices made in the Civil War, you need to no less than journey to the Asia Cemetery. And I am very familiar with this cemetery and with the Asia community. Well, folks, I've given you a little history lesson today, a history lesson not only in white and not only in black, and not only for the sake of the Union, but for the sake of rebel soldiers' memories ever so be.